Hi.
Good morning to you there in London. And I understand you're going to be telling us about how London is a case study in your presentation. So please take it away.
Yes, that's right. So, as I was saying, I've lived in cities my whole life. I was born in Kolkata in India. I lived in numerous cities in the Middle East, and I moved to London when I was 14, and it's still my home. It's actually been exactly 15 years and 3 days since I moved to London, and I'm very passionate about urban living, and I think it's really important. It plays a really important part in the development of people themselves. So, as Jan Gehl said, who's one of the architects of Copenhagen, cities, we shape the cities first and then they shape us. And I feel that this is a very an important time during lockdown specifically to understand how can we redesign the city, the space that we live in, to fit the needs of the citizens. I think London has seen a big change in the past few months. And a lot of it is to do with the human dimension, as Jan Gehl calls it, to improve the way that cities behave. So to improve the liveliness, the safety, the sustainability, and the health of the city. As a co-founder of Humanizing Autonomy, which is a company that helps mobility systems to better understand vulnerable road users, the health of pedestrians and cyclists are very key to me. And on a personal note, I also don't have a driver's license, so actually it's really important that mobility solutions can take into account people like me and many others in London who don't use vehicles. One of the things, so what I would like to talk through today is different ways that digital solutions can help to improve the way that cities are designed, to help improve pedestrian and cyclist experience in cities. How can we make the city more pleasant? I think there are three main ways that this can be done. So the first way is have more and more separated space, in particular for walking and cycling. This is not a new idea. It's been done in Copenhagen for a long time. And actually, there are many companies, for example, Arup, which is the biggest engineering and urban design company in the world, they suggested a concept called FlexCurve in 2018, which is an idea about having shared mixed-use curbs for different situations. And this was also reflected by the National Association of City Transportation Officials, or NACTO, in the US, in their blueprint for autonomous urbanism. What's interesting to see is that in the last few months, through the street space program that London has been doing through the Mayor of London program, there has been an increase in cycle and walking space with the aim to increase cycling space tenfold and walking space fivefold by the end of the lockdown period, according to the Mayor of London. From my own experience cycling around London in the past few months, I have noticed there's lots more space for cycling, and that's been a great effect, and I see a lot more cyclists going around. One other thing that I've noticed, as you can see in the slide, is the complete pedestrianization of a previously very dense area of London called Soho. Now, Soho is a very old area in the middle of London for its nightlife and for its food and drinking culture. What's happened after lockdown is that the whole of the space has been pedestrianized with people sitting outside. This has been a big change for London. And I think while this is very normal in many other parts of Europe, for example, this is starting to have a new renaissance in al fresco dining in the UK. Moving on to the second way that I feel that the city can be adapted to improve the experience of citizens in London is to have improved to complement other mobility systems with walking and cycling instead of overwhelming them. Stockholm, for example, has a really interesting mixed-use environment where cycle lanes complement multimodal linkages, and that's been a great improvement for mobility across the city without the need for vehicles all the time. But we can't forget the vehicles. They play a very important part in the city's infrastructure, from delivering goods and people. And one way, and the third way that digital solutions can improve the life of Londoners, current and future, is to have a better understanding of vulnerable road use, a better understanding of pedestrians and cyclists from vehicles themselves, whether that's taxis or delivery goods. A lot of accidents that happen in London are particularly from heavy goods vehicles, such as trucks, as well as buses that hit cyclists, for example. What we do at Humanizing Autonomy is to help these mobility systems to better understand cyclists and pedestrians through understanding the body language and the subtle nuances of people. And we believe that with these insights, vehicles redesigned in London will be more aware of these vulnerable road users. And through the use of the sensors, will augment the vision of the drivers of today, as well as the autonomous vehicles of the future, as we were hearing about in the previous talk. It's essential that these vehicles are smarter and more in tune with the citizens that they interact with, and are built with the ability to understand these subtle nuances of human behavior, especially in cities like London, when you have such a diverse a range of activities that happen, whether you're shopping in Oxford Street in the middle of a day like today, or maybe on a Friday night, Saturday night in Soho or Shoreditch. It has a completely different experience. And vehicles of today and tomorrow will need to understand this. The thing I want to finish on is that this type of understanding of vulnerable road users through these digital solutions, for example, we use just the computer vision from normal cameras to understand these nuances, to understand what people are about to do in terms of the road situation. This needs to be scalable to all cities, not just London. And it's important that this technology is really built around the citizens. And by that, I mean, it needs to fit the quirks of the citizens of different cities and how people behave in different cities. And it needs to, we need to make sure that as a technology company and as part of wider society, that this technology fits well with what Jan Gehl calls that human dimension, and makes cities safer and more pleasant for all road users. Thank you.
Thank you, Raunaq, for that presentation. I have a question about what you've been talking about with London. You know, it is a city with a rich history and tradition, but the reality that we have here in Europe, in a city like London or in Berlin, is that we often have to retrofit them, don't we, with new digital solutions for mobility. What do you think we can learn from places, I'm thinking of China, where we see entire new cities springing up from the ground, where they can design those solutions already as they're building the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, what we see in many European cities, and London as well as one of them, is that we have these streetscapes that were initially designed for other modes of transportation, and then they were somehow retrofit for vehicles, such as cars. And now we're left with this legacy of a very vehicle-centric city, which doesn't necessarily suit the needs of the citizens anymore. I think going forward, for example, with new cities springing up, it seems a good idea to reevaluate what is the point of transportation and mobility in the first place. It is to get people from point A to point B. And one thing that I'm happy that I'm seeing in many of these newer cities is this better understanding of multimodal transportation. Even if you go to cities like Singapore, which are relatively old compared to a lot of cities in new cities springing up in China, they have a very good understanding of the distance between a transport hub and say a cycling point. And I think these are the considerations that need to be taken in order to make cities a more sustainable and healthy place to live.
And Raunaq, as you watch human behavior to shape mobility solutions, how much can external factors really change that behavior? I'm thinking, of course, of the current crisis.
It changes it in a massive way. While people more or less look the same, so from our computer vision algorithms, there's no difference in detecting people. We can see that the way that people behave is very different. So in a street scene, we've been working, for example, with the Department for Transportation in Manchester, and they've been using our technology to understand how to use public space better, to see how people are, for example, keeping socially distant and so on. And what we're seeing is, one, a big surge in the cycling and walking, of course, but also we're seeing people using public space, so that's streets or stations, in very different ways in order to get from point A to point B with maybe a new mode of transportation that they wouldn't usually use, but also, of course, with the guidelines set in place for social distancing, how are people using the space is very important. Manchester, for example, are using the insights from our technology to better plan their public space, so where to put up barriers, where to have staff there to help people, and so on. And we really feel that this type of digital technology can be used in a very proactive way to help the public infrastructure really fit the needs of the citizen.
Very interesting. Very interesting stuff there, Raunaq Bose, from Humanizing Autonomy. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day there in London.
Thank you. Have a good one.